Welcome back, everyone. Mr. Talbott here for you. We're going to keep going with our talk on the Mongols for topic 2.2. So again, make sure we got our notes out. We're adding to them since we've already done the reading. We left off with Genghis Khan, and we talked about he's the guy that's going to try and break the wheel, and he's united. By this point, he has united the Mongols together, but now in order to keep them together, he pretty much needs to expand out. And we're going to kind of look at what happens with the Mongol Empire in our video today. So by the time it's completed, Genghis Khan will have already died. But during his life, supposedly he said, quote, "I have completed a great work, uniting the whole world in one empire." Now, of course, the Mongol Empire is not, in fact, the whole world, but it's a big chunk. It's the largest contiguous empire in the history of the world, the second largest ever, only to the British Empire, which come several centuries down the road here. And we can kind of think just from a diversity standpoint, you're going to see people from, Dar al-Islam. So we have Muslims, we have Christians in Russia, we've got Taoists and Buddhists out of East Asia, as well as the Mongols themselves. So ginormous empire. Now, the weird thing is they're going to kind of be the unifier of and the connector of all this culture, but the Mongols themselves don't actually have a whole lot of culture. They don't have their own written language that they spread. They don't have their own religion they spread. They don't really bother spreading their own language. So they don't have any famous, architectural buildings because, again, there are nomadic people that just lives in yurt tents. So they end up being kind of a blender of culture. Now, again, the Mongols are exceptionally good at finding good ideas, and they didn't care where it came from. If it was good ideas, they were going to use the heck out of it. They were going to exploit you to help them be benefit. And they're going to try and boost trade, and we'll kind of see all of those things. So I kind of think of them as like a Silicon Valley, whereas like, hey, we don't care where you're from. As long as you got a good idea, we're going to blend it up here together, and we're going to get all these smart people in our capital, whether that was Karakorum or Beijing, and we're going to have all their good ideas put to good use. So what we'll see is as they conquer these people, they would say, okay, who has a skill of some kind, whether they were people that make gunpowder or blacksmith or doctors, or they were scribes or metalworkers, whatever the case. If you had a skill, they weren't going to kill you. Now, unfortunately, if you didn't have a skill, if you were kind of just a farmer or someone that, didn't have one of those that we listed, you're probably going to die. Maybe directly, or maybe they were going to use you as like a human shield as they went into their next battle. Maybe you would be lucky and they would keep you alive to spread the terrible stories of them to scare their enemies. Particularly, though, if you were someone that were in a city that did not surrender, then the Mongols were probably, you weren't going to do so well. But the bigger one with all those skilled people moving all over kind of Eurasia now, the knowledge and technology that was first kind of developed, in places like China and India and, all those houses of wisdom we saw in Darwinism, they're all now going to kind of get to be able to get those people together and send those people around the Mongolian Empire. So knowledge and technology are going to spread as a result. So again, the Mongols, they don't care where you're from. They would say about religion that, people have all these different fingers to kind of help, them with different things. They kind of view the same thing with religion. So, whatever works for you, they're cool with it. As long as you didn't challenge the supremacy of the Khans. So as long as you were saying like, hey, whatever the heck God or gods you want, as long as you recognize that on this planet in your lifetime, you were under Mongol rule, we're cool with you. That's why Hindus and Buddhists and Christians and Muslims and Taoists and all sorts of other people could all coexist together. And we're going to see they're together, but we'll see with the Mongol Empire, it's really not around that long, historically speaking. You're talking 150 years. So a couple lifetimes, and this whole massive empire, second biggest empire in world history, is gone. And once that happens, so we've got all this technology and all this information has been spread out. Well, now we got to kind of rebuild the world that the Mongols kind of, in some ways, wiped out. And so that new world is going to be rebuilt with a lot of the ideas the Mongols were able to kind of combine and bring together. Bureaucracies, taxes, but also trade routes that they help improve upon, like the Silk Road and stuff. That's going to kind of lead to more of a to more of a modern world. Genghis Khan himself sees his empire spread really far from, he's born pretty much into a really hard situation. By his lifetime, he feels like, oh, man, I've conquered almost everything there is to conquer. And the problem for the Mongols is that even before Genghis Khan dies, you can start to see some of those old issues of kind of infighting and stuff happening between Genghis Khan's own kids. And we're going to see the empire is going to kind of have to get divided up a little bit. Just like the Incas was, their big empire in South America. And just like the Inca family members start having issues with each other, some infighting, and we'll see the Mongol moment ends pretty quickly. But just for comparison's sake, to give you some idea here, you look at the United States today, not counting our friends in Alaska and Hawaii, the Mongol Empire was more than double that. Way bigger than what China had. Bigger even than what we saw with Dar al-Islam and all the caliphates. Massively bigger than the Roman Empire. And even, we keep talking about the Inca was a huge empire, the biggest in the Americas. It's a tenth of what the Mongols did, and they did that pretty much in one lifetime. They're going to expand this far. Now, if you see here, and you'll see it on kind of our next slide as well, you get kind of these different terms and stuff kind of in the all caps. Those are kind of some of the groups and the kids of Genghis Khan and the ancestors that are going to kind of start splitting things up. And we're going to start to see this empire do. So you can see how small it was initially, and it just grows. This is all happening with Genghis Khan right now. So he's just expanding. People would surrender sometimes. They wouldn't. He would conquer pretty brutally. You're going to see him move into Persia right there. There's this new guy on the scene. Then that new guy on the scene is going to die, and they're going to pull back. And then the big division and civil war start happening between the different khans. And that's going to be what kind of leads to the breakup. And these aren't things you need to memorize, but it's just kind of amazing from a historical standpoint to think of how small they were, how fast it grew and became huge, and then how fast it dissolves and goes away again. But we're going to see the legacy of what they do is going to stick around for some time. And that's going to be in large part because the military power can only take you so far. It just becomes kind of too impossible to govern, especially once you start fighting amongst yourself. So Mongolian population is really small, way smaller than China, which had the biggest population in the world back then, as it does today. And we know China was way more technologically advanced. So the Mongols initially, they shouldn't have stood a chance. The big thing the Mongols have going for them is they do a good job of dividing up their military into more manageable sizes, all kind of based around the number 10. So you'll see, 10 soldiers would do one thing, and then you'd have 100 and 1,000. So everything was kind of in groups of 10. And what helps them is kind of like we saw meritocracy in China. It helps to know people in the Mongolian Empire, but the bigger thing is being loyal to whoever the Khan was. And as long as you're loyal to that Khan, they were pretty cool with you. And as long as you did a good job, you would get to kind of keep your command. If you did a bad job, you weren't loyal, then you were pretty much going to be taken care of, and you wouldn't get to rule your command anymore. So then we also know these people were nomadic and were based around, the horse and everything, and they're great archers. And because of technology like stirrups and saddles that they borrow pretty much from China, they're going to be this really fast-moving military unit. Eventually, again, they're great at finding good ideas and putting together. They're going to take things like gunpowder and siege weapons from China, and they're going to use that as they expand and take over more of China and into Persia and eventually into Russia. So all of these things, they're going to combine. They're also going to get writing from people like in India and in Persia, and that's going to help kind of govern their region. So again, they take these good ideas that they didn't have themselves, they use them for their expansion, but then again, once they're expanded that far, pretty quickly we see them dissolve away. In our next video, we're going to talk about some case studies of what it was like to be conquered by the Mongols, and we'll see some situations that take place there. Remember that, add your notes if you need to, summarize all good things.